Since April 15, when clashes broke out between the army of Sudan and the paramilitary forces, the Indian government has been in touch with the United States, the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. This is to ensure the safety of Indians who are stranded in that strife-torn nation. Top government sources in New Delhi have confirmed that the External Affairs Minister, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, had a telephonic conversation with his counterpart from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and that both the nations have assured practical support to India on ground. Mind you, these nations have an ear of the two warring leaders in Khartoum. Even ambassadors in Washington and High Commission in London are in touch with the government. Those stranded have confirmed to News18 that they are in touch with the Indian embassy in Sudan. But these are largely people who are based in Khartoum. But there are others who are based in Al Fahar, a town which is more than 1,000 kilometers away, who believe nobody is in touch with them yet. A WhatsApp group has been created to keep everyone alert all the time. But is everybody part of that WhatsApp group? That's the big concern, because according to official data, the number of Indians in Sudan is around 4,000, including 1,200 who have actually settled in the country. Dr. Jaishankar even has had a confirmation or has confirmed a conversation with his Egyptian counterpart. The death toll in Sudan so far is nearly about 200, with more than 1,800 injured. Humanitarian activities have been interrupted in many states due to widespread insecurity. The World Food Programme has announced a temporary suspension of its operations across Sudan following the killing of 3 of its staff who were caught in the crossfire, and this happened in North Darfur. The World Health Organization, or the WHO, has warned that several of Khartoum's hospitals have run out of blood. There is also a huge shortage of transfusion equipment, intravenous fluids, and other vital medical supplies. Reports suggest that as many as 9 hospitals in Khartoum and 2 in Bahri, or Khartoum North, have closed down due to shelling and insecurity. Ceasefire has been called for, but there is still intermittent firing. That's what reports suggest. India has an experience of evacuations in tense situations, be it from war-hit Ukraine or post the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. India has successfully rescued Indian nationals back into the country in coordination with the agencies concerned. But it's so far it has not come to that pass as far as Sudan is concerned. Sudan has witnessed many political coups. The country has also been at the center of geopolitics owing to its geographical location. It borders the Red Sea, where the United States, the United Kingdom, fear the potential of a Russian base on the Red Sea. So this is the NATO versus Russia kind of a concern that comes in. Geopolitics comes into play. Many major geopolitical powers, including Russia, the United States, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, have been trying to get influence over Sudan. Nations have also pumped in huge amounts of money into this nation, into Sudan. Sudan's strategic location and agricultural wealth have even attracted regional players. The UAE and Saudi managed to gain influence over Sudan by forming a quartet called the Quad. This alliance included UAE, Saudi Arabia, US, and Britain. This alliance has mediated talks between Sudan, international organizations like the United Nations, and also other African nations. Now, let's try and understand this entire history of this country that came into fruition sometime in 1958, the Sudanese Revolution. The United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia took advantage of the revolutionary uprising of 2018-2019 to bring Sudan under their influence. Now, during this uprising, these two nations had supported the army and the paramilitary forces under the guise of quote-unquote stability, which resulted in a replacement of al-Bashir as a ruler, the dictator. As per media reports, the United Arab Emirates injected about $7 billion in Sudan's economy. Both the United Arab Emirates and the Saudis initially had suspicion over Bashir's intention, as he was balancing ties with the UAE, Saudi on one hand, while also trying to dance with Qatar and Tehran, that is Iran, on the other side. He used to receive subsidies from the UAE while also taking loans from Qatar. Later, the United Arab Emirates realized this and they halted fuel shipments to Sudan, which resulted in a shortage of foreign exchange, landing the country into an economic turmoil. Al-Bashir then cut subsidies on bread, and this was followed by huge demonstrations. People came out to the streets, and this later became the Sudanese Revolution. Now, during this revolution, Egypt offered exile to Bashir in Saudi Arabia, but he refused. After which, three countries, Egypt, UAE, and Saudi, reportedly reached out to Abdel Fattah al Burhan, a military general who had a great equation with these three nations and had also served in Saudi led forces in Yemen and also in Hemedti, the head of the paramilitary and head of the RSG, to bring forward this entire coup and orchestrate the downfall of al-Bashir. What happens is, a few days later, forces led by Burhan and Hemedti overthrew Bashir and installed the Transitional Military Council, or TMC. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE got Sudan into confidence as both leaders were loyal to these three nations. What's happening now is these two leaders themselves are at loggerheads with each other. That's why the armed forces and the paramilitary. Sudan had a government, but there was no stability. As revolutionaries and the TMC government were still negotiating, Hemedti's paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, killed 130 protesters, which attracted very, very strong reactions across the globe. This prompted the UK and the United States to intervene. Both the nations called for a dialogue. They said, back off, peace. They also said, let's work behind the scenes alongside the UK and the US to try and broker a deal in favor of stability. What happened was a power sharing agreement was signed upon, and Burhan, the head of the TMC, was made the head of the Sovereignty Council and the de facto head for the next 21 months, while Hemedti became deputy head of the council. So he was one rank below. However, now the battle for supremacy between Burhan's Sudanese Armed Forces, or the SAF, and Hemedti's RSF is leading to violence yet again in Sudan. They are firing at each other incessantly. Is there a role of the quartet, which I had mentioned earlier, that is the UAE, Saudi, UK, and Great Britain? Because they all came together after the revolution. The UAE and Saudi actually paid millions of dollars to ensure the council government remained loyal to them and did not lean towards Iran and Qatar. The UAE lobbied for Sudan to get American sanctions and the label of state sponsor of terrorism removed. A meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu was fixed, followed by meeting with the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. This was during the Trump regime. And this was quite contrary to the US policy on dealing with civilian governments. So an exception was made. The UAE kept funding Hemedti. Reportedly, his mined gold in Sudan is actually exported to Dubai for sale. 2 days ago, fire was opened at the US diplomatic vehicles, which led to Secretary of State Antony Blinken holding telephonic conversation with both the parties and telling them, back off, because if US installations, US civilians are harmed, then it would be very, very severe repercussions that what it would result. He had warned them about the safety of American citizens and diplomats. The US has a direct line to these two veteran warlords of Sudan. Blinken urged these two leaders to agree to a 24-hour ceasefire in order to allow the Sudanese to reunite with their families and, more importantly, to be able to obtain desperately needed relief supplies. Interestingly, the fight is not just in the capital Khartoum or in Darfur, it's spread to other cities too. And despite the ceasefire call, ceasefire does not actually exist on ground. Sudan has good bilateral relationships with the UK also. At times, both nations have seen a dip in relationship, but the United Kingdom has been actively involved in Sudan, not only through its foreign office, but many UK-based organizations have also worked in Sudan. Now, the real challenge is 4,000 odd Indian families, and how do you do or plan an evacuation if you need to move them out? New Delhi is actually striking the right chord by exploiting diplomatic relationships with these quartet nations to coordinate safety and evacuations of Indians stuck in Sudan. India is also engaging with Egypt. Dr. Jaishankar confirmed the conversation with his counterpart. India is engaged at a government level in New Delhi and the ambassador level in Washington, in London, United Kingdom. Jaishankar has also spoken with foreign ministers of UAE, Saudi Arabia, and also Egypt. All these three nations have great influence over the Sudanese leaders, along with UK and the United States. Now, the bosses of the forces fighting on ground are reportedly funded by the UAE. So UAE holds greatest sway, and India's equations with UAE are very, very good currently. Quad Troika statement, which is issued in December 2022, stated the Quad and Troika members support the Sudanese-led process and condemn spoilers attempting to restrict political space and undermine Sudan's stability and, of course, its entire democratic transition. So it is these nations which are going to help India confirm this evacuation and ensure the safety of Indian citizens. Let's hope they don't have to be evacuated. Peace prevails very, very soon. The safety remains of the Indian citizens. But it is very, very nervous days and pensive nights for all those families who are currently stuck in Sudan.